The Currowan fire on the New South Wales south coast began in late November 2019 in State Forest north of Nelligan. Through the whole of December and into January, it spread and merged with other fires at Clyde Mountain, Charlie's Forest and Moreton until it exceeded 480,000 hectares. In this video, we're going to drive the King's Highway, which runs from Batemans Bay to Canberra, as far as the historic town of Braidwood to see the aftermath. So it's mid-January 2020 and the air is still thick with smoke. The burned area starts right after you cross the Clyde River and turn onto the King's Highway, and things just get worse from there. The fire is still officially being controlled. Now, I've slowed this down because we're passing, on the left, the entrance to a bush block estate, largish plots of land located on either side of a steep-sided, thickly forested ridgeline. It's been completely burned out, and the agent's burned, buckled, now selling sign is an ironic comment on the hazards of such locations. As we begin the climb towards the Batemans Range, we're passing through granite country. There's normally a thick dark green understory of burrowangs, a species of cycad here. Their tough leaves have been burned to the trunk. They'll regenerate, but it will take many months. Very occasionally we pass small areas where the green forest canopy is still intact, but almost everywhere the fire has crowned, killing all the leaves. It will be years before these trees regain their full foliage. Many old forest giants, those vital trees with hollow trunks and branches that dozens of species rely on for daytime homes and nest hollows, have fallen. Along the high, drier ridgelines, there's total devastation. The burned area stretches for 30 kilometres south and 110 kilometres north. As far as you can see, everything has been burned. Fires like this, and larger, stretch right up the east coast. Before the onset of rapid climate change, there were extensive bushfires, but nothing like this has ever been recorded. In the past, even within heavily burned areas, small patches of bush survived, usually in especially wet places like creek lines, but almost all the creeks dried up months, even years ago. In the old normal, the wildlife that survived the fire could use the small, unburned patches within the burn, or come from nearby unburned bush to recolonise the burned areas as they regenerated. But with fires of this massive extent, taking out whole habitat types, we're in real ecological disaster territory. And it's not just the resident animals that died in the fire or starved to death afterwards. There are also those bird species that migrate up and down the east coast, filtering through these forests, feeding as they go, species like Australian white-eyes and yellow-faced honeyeaters. Their whole life cycle has been disastrously disrupted. In a catastrophe of this scale, common, numerous species can become rare and threatened virtually overnight. Australia has the worst per capita carbon emissions on the planet and is the world's largest exporter of coal. And the coal and coal seam gas we export comes back to burn our continent with drought and fire. Even now, the Morrison government and the New South Wales and Queensland governments are determined to dramatically increase our economically and ecologically suicidal exports. As we approach the top of the range, wet sclerophyll forest and rainforest cloaks the precipitous slopes. These forests depend on being regularly enveloped by cloud, but even these have dried out and burned, and the fire-sensitive rainforest flora might not regenerate. Over the summit, the King's Highway descends a little through burned open woods interspersed with farms. The fire stopped short of Braidwood largely because, as the area of open farmland increases, the drought-starved livestock had eaten the paddocks to the ground, and there wasn't enough fuel to sustain even a modest grass fire. The month-long closure of the highway between Canberra and Batemans Bay hammered historic Braidwood's already drought-hit economy, which depends partly on tourists and holidaymakers stopping at its cafes and shops.